Hello friends, today I'm very excited to show you the RaidenBox version 2.3. As you can see, this product is already making a statement with this box, which is quite interesting. It looks a bit fancier than packaging from other acrylic sandwich leverless controllers, and we've seen plenty of those this year. So naturally, we're going to ask why. Why should someone choose this controller in particular? The box is just the beginning of that answer, and everything that's contained inside this box will help us to get a better idea. I just want to quickly say thanks to RaidenBox for sending this over to me. The creator did not give me any instructions, so all opinions are my own. The version we're looking at today is the PS5 version, which comes installed with a slightly different firmware and includes a dongle for compatibility. You can also find a PC version of this on the official website, but I won't be linking to that so we can avoid any confusion. I know some of you are going to click the product link before we even get halfway through the video. First of all, please hold off because the rest of the video might be useful to you. But what I don't mind you doing is clicking on the subscribe button. So go ahead and do that, it really helps a smaller channel like mine. Let's try to get the sub count to 3,000. But anyway, let me give you some buying advice up front just in case you've got itchy fingers. Make sure you add at least the carry case to your basket. Just do it and thank me later. Let's start our video there actually, because the extras are a key feature of the RaidenBox. This is the carry case. It's a sturdy hard case. I have a few of these for other pieces of tech and they've always served me well. It has a fabric finish with the branding on the front, and I do think if your branding looks this cool, you definitely should slap it on your product. And I'm not saying that just because I'm Asian, I don't even know what that says. Probably lightning god or lightning box or something. I don't know, I can just about write my own name in Chinese. Anyway, let's move on. It's conveniently double zipped and has a carrying handle at the top. It's a bespoke case, so the controller sits perfectly snug. So snug that there's a handy tab to help raise the controller for extraction. And finally, we have a zip sealed netting on the top to contain some of our accessories. I do like this carry case a lot. My one came with a PS5 authenticator dongle. It's a PXN-N5, and this dongle will make the controller compatible with the PS5 and avoid the 8-minute timeout that happens with non-supported controllers. If you end up getting the PC version, I'm pretty sure you can go into the GP2040 web configurator and change the settings to put it into PS5 mode, and then you can get a dongle separately to get it running on the PS5. If you can't find a PXN-N5, a Brookwingman or Booter 5 will also work. It comes with a 2-meter braided USB-C to USB-A cable as standard. I prefer right-angled cables for these controllers, so I'll be using my own. And here is another one of the optional extras. These are white opaque keycaps. Just like the transparent ones pre-installed, they are made with PVC plastic and not 3D printed. Finally, it does come with 3 art papers, but you can add an additional 5. It's hard to advise on this one because it depends on your skill as an artist. The paper has a matte texture and it is in the US letter sizing at 8.5 inches by 11 inches. This means they will play well with all kinds of art supplies, pencils, crayons, Posca markers. It should all work fine. But if the plan is to print on these, I would advise most people to reconsider. The perforations are slightly wonky, so it will be incredibly difficult if not impossible to line up perfectly in your printer. So again, my advice is to only bother with the extra 5 if you're good at freehand art. Now finally, we can talk about the controller. So it's a 12-button controller, and just in case you stumbled into this video during a YouTube bender, these are designed primarily for fighting games, and instead of a traditional lever for directional controls, we have buttons. Left, down, right, jump, and the attack buttons are over here. Leverless controllers also come in variations with more buttons, and this is down to preference. I personally rarely use the additional buttons in my playstyle, so a 12-button controller is perfectly fine for me. And if you're a complete beginner, you'll find this less intimidating as well. The size is 230mm by 130mm, so this is going to be best suited for tabletop play with the hands hovering, because it's not wide enough to be optimal for lap comfort. It is possible, but not the best in this regard, and there's no chin for lazy palms. The bottom edge of the controller is chamfered at a 30-degree angle, which is generous compared to other acrylic sandwich builds of this size, and makes more of a difference for smaller controllers like this, since your hands are more likely to come in contact with the edge. We have all the appropriate function buttons along the top left in a neat line, and you can see they are conveniently grouped into pairs. The first pair is Start and Share, the second pair is Home and Touchpad, and the last set is L3 and R3. The last three buttons being in this order is helpful because they're used often in training modes. These are long, solid buttons, and you'd think they would be easier to use than the squidgy nubs that are common on other controllers, but the height of these actually make it wobbly, and sometimes they feel like they might fall off. They won't, but that's how it feels, and they're not as sturdy as something you might find on the Kitsune or Victrix models. There's a small power indicator light here that reflects through the layers of acrylic in a fun way, so it looks like it's a pillar of light from most angles. I do think that a screen would have been more useful instead of a power light, because other than letting you know that the controller is on, the screens on most other GP2040 controllers are great for quick status checks and troubleshooting. But I'm guessing Gadget Runner felt that a screen would clash with the minimalist look. There's an EXT port for authentication devices up here. This is where the dongle for PS5 compatibility will go. For my OCD bros, the USB-C socket is slap bang in the middle, but that means the center screws are offset. The button cluster is centralized and is in line with the edge of the function row. We have 22.5mm action buttons and a larger 28.5mm jump button. These are transparent cookie grill style buttons, and this is the first time I've seen this style of keycap in person. And I do like that they add visual texture to the controller. They are smooth but have a slight grain on the surface, just enough to add a bit of grip, and I can already tell that it's going to be easy to execute slide maneuvers on this. The base is transparent, so it's mod friendly if you want to place art down there too. And instead of the usual rubber feet, we get an optional full-sized layer of felt. I personally enjoy this a lot because it stops the screws from causing damage to surfaces and adds grip and comfort on bare skin. I can't imagine this will be easy to clean if it comes into contact with greasy food stains and such, so it will also encourage us to stop living like degenerates. Now let's talk about the aesthetics. The RaidenBox 2.3 is designed out of the box for people who enjoy a minimal, clean aesthetic. And this is minimal cranked up to 11. It's got a comic book page monotone look with everything pure white except for the logo over here. And because of the simple tones, the LED lights get a chance to interact with elements around the controller and bounce around in interesting ways. And I think that's quite cool, especially if you play in dark environments. The look and design choices get a thumbs up from me, but I do think Gadget Runner can improve on their attention to detail. It looks like they slapped a coat of paint on the layer underneath the top plate. This is especially easy to spot on the EXT port. I think they could have just left this EXT port alone. In fact, the paint job makes it look worse. And my one arrived with specks and paint underneath the top plate. I'm going to see if I can clean it up a bit if I do any art modding later. Finally, for my personal taste, I do like to have labeling on my function buttons, which makes the art papers more impactful. As you saw earlier, the RaidenBox comes with art paper. In my U16 review last month, I talked about how much of a game changer it would be if Hot 42 had included matte paper with their controller instead of glossy paper. This is exactly what the RaidenBox offers. So if the minimal look isn't your thing, or you want some labeling on your controller, or you just want to mess around and really make this controller feel like yours, you can do that. They're helpfully perforated, but I recommend using a scalpel to cut these instead of tearing it by hand for a smoother finish. On the website, there is a section dedicated to art modding with a downloadable template and instructions for printing. But if you are printing, I would advise that you provide your own paper or card, because as I mentioned earlier in the video, the perforations are not aligned properly. I can confirm that a normal household printer can print on it though. If you want to go the other way and maximize the minimal look even more, the optional white keycaps would be a good choice. They're made from PVC as well, and they are compatible with Choc V1 switches, which means that they have double stems. I've snapped keycaps like this before, so I recommend being very careful when removing these. The safest way to remove these is to open up the controller to get a better grip on them and applying a gentle wiggle. The stock switches are clickies, yes, clickies, Nearly every leverless controller out there that uses low profile choke switches come with linear switches, but the RaidenBox has made the brave choice of going with clickies. This could be a reference to the name of the controller because the sound and feel of these switches clicking away correlates better with the idea of lightning and electricity. It's very important to know that the switches are not hot swappable. They are soldered in, so if you don't like clicky switches, you're going to have to wait for version 3. I'm told the RaidenBox version 3 will be hot swappable among other improvements. I want to apologize for what you're about to see because I completely botched the installation process for the felt base, but decided I would show you what my controller looks like as a cautionary tale. Please take your time with this process. So let's take a look at other options within the size range of the RaidenBox. This is the Hot 42G series. This controller is shorter and narrower than the RaidenBox. It uses MX switches, so if you enjoy the feeling of full-sized mechanical keyboards, this will replicate that experience. I do find that my hands feel cramped together on the G controller though, and if you use slide techniques, it's impossible on the Hot 42G series. And as you can see, the G series has a screen. I mentioned these earlier in the video, and it also has a turbo button over here. But because the RaidenBox also runs on a GP2040, you can bind a turbo button to any of these function keys if you need it. This controller has two USB-C sockets, so if one fails or you prefer a different orientation, that option is available. The G series is hot swappable, so if you don't like the stock switches, you can source your own and change them to your liking. This is the Hot 42S series. It's similar to the G in terms of features with the screen, two USBs, the size, and hot swappable switches. But it uses low profile switches like the RaidenBox does. Sliding is easy on this controller. This is the Doyle HitPad standard. This also has two USB sockets, a screen, and it's hot swappable. But this version I have, which is the version 1, only takes Gateron switches. I prefer Chaos selection of switches, but only version 2 is compatible with those. The big things to consider here are the aesthetics and the quality. This thing is put together beautifully with an aluminium top and see-through bottom with downward facing LEDs. It's also longer than the RaidenBox, so it sits very well on the lap. It does sound hollow and clacky though, so if you prefer a deeper sound signature, that's not what you get from the Doyle HitPad. Finally, this is the Hot 42U16. I'm only including this in a comparison because Hot 42 also provide art paper with this controller. But it's not as easy to use because it's heavily glossed and textured. It does come with some pre-designed art inserts though. If your intention is to draw on the papers, the RaidenBox is better in this regard. You can find the links to all of these controllers below, and I've also made videos about them on my channel, so make sure to check them out after this one. In the beginning of this video, I asked why someone might choose this controller in particular. And I hope that in the preceding minutes, I've shown you that this controller can be your one-stop shop to everything you need to get up and running in your leverless journey. It's about the things you don't have to do, like get a separate dongle, get your art professionally printed and cut, sourcing replacement button caps, and modding the bottom for a soft felt base. It's all bespoke, it's nice and tidy, and will save you precious time having to look for all of these things individually. In other words, it can arrive on your doorstep as a complete package. And if the extra keycaps and art papers aren't for you, I do hope you make the right choice and at least get the carry case. This thing is sleek, it's convenient, and the ritual of unzipping it and raising the flap never gets old. It feels good every time. I do like what RaidenBox is going for here, and whatever changes or improvements they're planning to add with their upcoming controllers, I hope that they don't let go of these bespoke extras, because this experience is what makes the RaidenBox stand out, since at the end of the day, it's a GP2040 controller, and under the hood it does the same thing as every other GP2040 controller. So the bespoke extras is the unique selling point. The only thing that might be a trip up here is that you have to be sure that you're on board with clicky switches. I personally enjoy the sound, but if you find that clickies are not for you or it's causing stressful situations in your marriage, the lack of a hot swappable feature is a choke point. And the upcoming version 3 is more suitable for experimenters. The other thing to strongly consider is the price. If you're patient and willing to source third-party extras and mods yourself, you can save some money by going with a Hot 42 instead, especially if you live in the UK, where the RaidenBox is currently more than £140 bare bones, and probably the equivalent of that in US dollars. So do you save money or do you save time? I hope you found today's video helpful. Let me know what you think about the RaidenBox below. Do the extras entice you? Do you already have one? What would you like to see in the upcoming version 3? All the products I've mentioned today will be linked below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to binge my Leverless controller reviews, click on this playlist.